those who are joining us online. My name is Richard Manley-Tanis. I'm a diaconal minister with the United Church of Canada, and currently and celebratorily the principal of St. Andrew's College. This is a family reunion, and it's an amazing family reunion for two reasons. One is that currently the United Church of Canada is celebrating its 100th anniversary, which occurred on June 8th. And the other family reunion is because we are celebrating Edmund Oliver and Lydia Gruchy as those leaders in our past who point towards this college's future. And so you're going to hear some of those stories today. You're going to hear about why these two people who capture what in my experience is essential to the United Church, which is an openness to God's diversity and defending that diversity in a time when the world unfortunately reminds us quite a bit of when Edmund Oliver was core and central to bringing this denomination together and serving in the trenches in World War I. So their legacies inspire us. And this center, which you will hear more about, I hope points to that future that invites us to continue to do what we've done in the past in new and innovative ways. And so, it is my pleasure to introduce the first executive director of the Oliver and Gruchy Learning Center, Dr. Vernon Lee.
Good morning, friends and distinguished guests, faculty, staff, and well-wishers and supporters of all that we do at St. Andrew's College. I'm Vernon Lee. I'm going to be the first executive director of the Oliver and Gruchy Learning Center, so pray for me. I'm deeply gratified that you're joining us here today for this newish turn in the life of St. Andrew's College, the launch of the Oliver and Gruchy Learning Center. We have a brief program of introduction to the center and to energies and visions that have brought us to this very point. The privilege of introducing the various speakers falls to me. The order of speeches and presentations is given to you in the little program that was handed to you at when you came into this room. First up is Sheila Lavender, a member of the Oliver family with deep roots in the United Church of Canada and in the life of this very college. I've had the privilege of serving with Sheila on the Living Skies Region Contemplative Gathering planning team, and so Sheila knows my work and will be praying quite a bit harder than most of you, therefore. Sheila is going to share with us a brief reflection on Edmund Oliver.
Switch glasses. It's an age thing. Well, first of all, I want to thank Richard and Vernon for the invitation to speak this morning. I was asked to give a reflection on the life of Edmund Oliver, and as his eldest grandchild, I guess I'm doing it on behalf of my family who are sitting over here. I'll introduce them, my husband Rob, my cousin Joan Oliver McIntyre from Medicine Hat, my brother Peter Oliver, who's here in the city, and Joan's eldest son, Hector McIntyre, who works in Calgary, and so is the great-grandchild of Edmund Oliver. I was asked to do this a number of years ago for the City of Humboldt Remembrance Day service, and I thought, gee, I've already got a lot of it written out, so I've adapted some of it for today. When the First World War began, it was not thought to be a long-lasting war, but as time wore on and many deaths occurred, it was apparent that more soldiers were required at the front. Those attending university or seminary were not immune to this need. Eventually, Granddad, as the founding principal of St. Andrew's College, felt the call. So he joined in 1916, and at that time he promised my grandmother, the love of his life, that he would write a letter to her each day he was away. She in turn would answer his letters in the same manner. As my grandfather's words to her were, "If you save what I write to you, someday we might like to read them together when the war is over." He was a man of vision and hope, and I would add a bit of a romantic. As it turned out, in the midst of war, it was much easier for my grandmother to keep his letters than it was for him to hang on to hers. So the collection of what amounted to a full 3 years of daily letters is very much one-sided. Even then, one can read between the lines and guess at some of what she had written to him. His letters were not long epistles, sometimes only a paragraph dashed off when he had a few moments to himself. And they would often have arrived in batches as he was able to send them. Likewise, with wartime mailing, her letters to him arrived in batches. But each day, these dated letters contained his thoughts and experiences. And each day they were a welcome time for him to be close to her in spirit as he poured out his feelings and stories to his sweetheart. He wrote not only of his experiences as a chaplain in the heat of war, but of his own concerns for the fledgling theological college he had left behind, and all manner of things which he thought about concerning the greater church and the ongoing need for learning opportunities for those who would one day return from war to continue settling the Canadian prairie that he had grown to love. He himself was born and raised in southern Ontario in a farming community. I have read all 190 plus letters, but I want to highlight just 3 things this morning. A small taste of what he experienced as a chaplain at a very horrible time in human history. One short story about his acquaintance with Dr. John McCrae, the creator of that famous poem we usually hear each year on Remembrance Day. And lastly, what I think was an influencing factor from his wartime experience, which led to his fight to have women recognized as ordained ministers in Canada. Here are my grandfather's words in the letters to his wife. This one is dated the 18th of October in 1917. Sometimes people say chaplains are unnecessary. I thought the best way to convince you, though I don't think you need convincing, was to give you a sample of the letters which come to me. When a rush is on, it is practically impossible to answer the questions people write to me about. So he then went on to describe some of the letters that he got, and it was usually around 40 a day, and he was very good at answering his correspondence. As a wartime chaplain, his was very much a ministry of communication and conversation. Conversation with the young soldiers, communication, written communication to all the families who wrote and wanted to find out how their son was doing. He continued in his letter to my grandmother, "Today was a heartbreaking day. I saw such great gaping wounds, stumps of legs, of arms, heads swollen, all out of shape through having been shot, trenched feet and broken thighs, that one can never forget such sights. If I can help just a little in this welter of suffering, of bruised and maimed, and comfort the dying, it is worthwhile. I have 2 soldier boys dying now. To go into a ward and watch the nursing sisters, again, his great respect for women, to go into the ward and watch the nursing sisters washing and dressing wounds, and hear ill-repressed groans of agony. Well, I couldn't have done it a year ago, but I can endure it now, even the smell of it. And I am glad to say that I can keep cool, and it does not make me anxious when a man dies. I think it ought to make me a better principal and a better Christian, and perhaps, who knows, a better husband and father. I didn't know there could be such sorrow and suffering in the world, but it'll be over someday, and then I'll take a day off. Like all military personnel, he would have worked 24/7. On the 30th of January, this is about 4 months later, of 1918, he writes, "I just heard of the death of Colonel McCrae. He was the officer commanding of medicine at the No. 3 base hospital, and Granddad had spent some time working at that hospital himself. McCrae took pneumonia and was only sick 2 or 3 days. He was a great fellow, always came to my evening service, quite a philosopher, and get this, a bit of a poet." I smile to think that 100+ years after McCrae's death, we still use McCrae's poem, and here we are today, 90 years after Granddad's death, reading his words. Sometimes Granddad's wartime work took him back and forth to England, often to arrange for books, as he became very involved in starting what was then called the University of Vimy Ridge. He was named its president. This was created to help the soldiers during their downtime to continue receiving education that would prepare them for their eventual return to civilian life in this young country of ours. A wartime version of lifelong learning. One Sunday evening, while in London, England, he attended worship at City Temple Church. The speaker that evening was a woman. I believe it was this encounter which made him think very seriously about the role of women in ministry and worship leadership. So on the 19th of August, 1918, he wrote, "I went in the evening to City Temple to hear Miss Maud Royden. She is pulpit assistant and looks not unlike yourself." Remember, he's writing this to his wife. "I was very favorably impressed. Her subject was religion and poetry, our poetry theme. It was the ablest sermon I have heard in quite a long time. There was nothing mannish about her." I thought of that and I thought he may have preferred I wore a dress today, but there was nothing mannish about her. Her address was scholarly, excellent, earnest, and she was modest and dignified. After hearing her, I am not without belief that women should enter theology. Perhaps, he says, it may save the theological colleges. Here I want to add a footnote about Lydia Gruchy, the first woman to be ordained in the United Church of Canada and also the first in Canada itself. Lydia's brother had been a student in those early days of St. Andrew's College, but he was killed during the war. So when Granddad returned home from war to his work in the college, he contacted Lydia and suggested she might take her brother's place in theological studies at the college. Lydia began in 1920 and graduated at the top of her class in 1923, then went on, not ordained, to serve such places as Verrigan, Waka, and Kelvington, while Grandad fought for the ordination of women. He was the first president of the New Saskatchewan Conference, formed at Church Union, and eventually held that position for the first 2 years of 1925 to 1927. Then he was the fourth moderator of the United Church of Canada from 1930 to 1932. So he was well positioned to continue to push for the ordination of women. Eventually, in 1936, Lydia was ordained, although sadly Grandad had died the previous summer at Round Lake after having spoken at a church camp gathering. He did not get to celebrate that momentous event. Armistice was effective the 11th of November, 1918. But it takes time for soldiers to be repatriated, so he did not return to Saskatchewan and Saskatoon until early in June of 1919. War has always held a mixture of emotions. I'm going to end by reading his last two letters, dated London, May the 30th and the 31st of 1919. He writes, "I have said goodbye to everyone, have written all my farewell notes, and I'm just waiting for the hours to pass till the train moves out from Euston Station in the morning, and the ship sails from Liverpool that evening. Today completes my 3 years of service, and though I shall not be a civilian for some days yet, still my main work is over, and I can look back upon it as a completed episode. 3 years have made many differences. Bateman is gone. That would have been Reginald Bateman, the first professor of English here at the university. Bateman has gone. Scores of men I have known over here will never return to Canada at all. I think we are all a little older and a little sadder. I have often been anxious about you, but you never failed once to be brave, a real soldier's wife. In all your letters, you have never complained, and I assure you I appreciated your pluck and bravery." And so his final letter the next day, the day of sailing home to Canada. "The day has come for going home. I do not know whether I shall beat this letter to you or not. I am writing it in order to race it across the Atlantic, and in order that my record of a daily letter might be complete. If anyone had told us when we were married, they were married in 1911, that in precisely 5 years' time, 1916, I should be in uniform and away from you for 3 years, and that I could write a daily letter for 36 full months, I should have thought him to be mad. Tomorrow, the 1st of June, is the anniversary of our wedding. I shall be on the old sea, speeding towards you as fast as the old Adriatic can cut the Atlantic waves. I am impatient to see you and the boys. This would be the first 2 of his eventually 5 sons. I do not know what the future has in store for me for work. Perhaps the college, perhaps something else. I know he was being wooed to be president of Queen's University. But I do hope I shall have more opportunity to stay home. If we reckon the days since we were married, I have been away as much as at home, and this is not as I would like it. You will find me a little bolder, a little grayer. Perhaps the war has driven some of the fun out of life, but my heart is as full of love as ever for you and the boys. Love, Edmund. When soldiers are away at war, they miss such things as the death of a friend or a close family member. His own mother died during the time he was away. The birth of a child, wedding anniversaries, etc. But I think it is true, love endures. Granddad, like each of us, lived in and learned from life's shadowed times, but he also felt called to be light in the world. So I want to close with a poem that was said to have been of great inspiration to our grandfather during his life in Saskatchewan, and which has been used in several writings dedicated to his memory, although the author is unknown. It is a poem which I hope could inspire each of us who are the benefactors of those who have gone before us. If this bit of prairies be worthier because of me, stronger for the strength I bring, sweeter for the songs I sing, purer for the path I tread, lighter for the light I shed, richer for the gifts I give, happier because I live, nobler for the death I die, not in vain have I been I. The very Reverend Dr. Edmund Oliver's life was not in vain, as shown in the influence that he had on this college, this province, and the United Church of Canada, and also in the lives of his family members. Thank you.
Thanks, Sheila, for those well-chosen and moving words of reflection. We turn now to a closer focus on the other illustrious historical personage that is the namesake of this new learning center. Shelley Manley Tannis is the minister at the United Church in Davidson, Saskatchewan. Shelley, graciously on our behalf, has been doing a little digging, not just in her garden, and is here today to offer to us a sense of Lydia Gruchy's inspiration and the effects of Lydia's work in energizing women in their service to church and society.
Thank you, Vernon, Professor Lee. Thank you all for allowing me to be here with you for a few minutes and to be part of this special occasion. I'm glad that Vernon mentioned digging and gardens, because as part of my moments with you, I do want to name and acknowledge that St. Andrew's College is situated and partnered as part of Treaty 6 territory. That this beautiful province that many of us here call home has been loved and stewarded and dug and appreciated for centuries, for generations, and that we follow in the footsteps of First Peoples, We pray for reconciliation between all people and all of creation. Speaking of creation and all my relations, I am not related to Lydia Gruchy. I'm also not an alumni of St. Andrew's College, so I'm really glad that Edmund Oliver said no to going to Queen's, because I'm a Queen's grad, and there's a couple of us here actually, and I wouldn't want to get in trouble. But to speak about Lydia's family. Family was important to her from what I can tell in my reading and the stories and the people that I've met. She was born into a large family, was one of 8 or 9 siblings. She shared home with siblings throughout the years, first in Paris, in Saskatchewan, and also later in life in BC. She had siblings that had come to Saskatchewan, and she followed them. So as I wrote this and thought about what I would share today, I was going to say, well, I am going to say, that there are no direct descendants of Lydia Gruchy, and that is as she did not have children of her own. And did you know that nephews and nieces, so descendants from your siblings, did you know that those are called collateral relatives, collateral descendants? I love that, collateral descendants. And what I was going to say is we know that there are some collateral descendants of Lydia Gruchy's out there somewhere. And last night, I got to speak to one of them, just last night, and I do have goosebumps here. I know they'll be watching this at some point, some of this family. So I just did a little reading and found the name of the nephew of Lydia's that spoke at her funeral. His name was Philip Strudwick. I Googled and found a Strudwick in Langley, BC, which is the area that that family was from. And Strudwick is the name of one of Lydia's sister who married into that family. Philip was her nephew. He's the one that spoke at the service. The young man that I found, who graciously returned my call last night, is the son of another nephew. Sorry, not the son, the grandson of another nephew in the Strudwick family. So Lydia's great nephew. And he told me a little bit, and he said, but you really want to talk to my mom. She's married into the family. She wasn't a Strudwick, but she knows a lot of the stories. And so graciously, Althea agreed to chat. I gave her a call, and she told me a little bit about the story of marrying in. Althea married Gary Strudwick, who would be Lydia's great nephew. But not only did she marry in to the family, it was Lydia herself who married her and Gary. She was gracious and willing to tell me a little bit about Lydia and about their wedding and about how much that meant. She figures that Lydia was probably in her late 70s or early 80s by then, and was willing and interested in officiating at their wedding. So I was going to say that even if we didn't have direct descendants, and we have collateral descendants, I was going to say something about all of us being descendants. And we know from the teachings of all my relations that we are indeed all connected. I just wanted to give you a couple brief examples in ways that we are all connected, especially, I think, for women in ministry in the United Church and perhaps other denominations. Just a couple of examples, but when my father, who was also a Queen's grad and went on settlement to Manitoulin Island in 1969, one of his very first colleagues was Deaconess Geraldine Bould. So I always knew that women were ministers. The second little thing, not little thing, but the second story that connects is that my father did not live very long and was only in ministry about 12 years, but he supervised a student a couple of summers around 1979, 1980, and that student was a woman. And apparently, I don't remember what the questions were, but I had a few questions for him about that. So Reverend Sharon Wilson is part of that story. I was ordained in 2001, and a woman who was a big part of my early ministry journey at Nipawin, Saskatchewan, an extremely strong lay leader, and the first woman to study pharmacy and graduate from pharmacy at the University of Saskatchewan, Dorothy Morrow. So you see, we are all connected, and we are all collateral relatives of Reverend Dr. Lydia Gruchy, the one who said, when she was asked in an interview in the 1960s, "What do you see for the future of the church?" And she said, "Well, I don't think very much will change. We just keep busy in the future." She did acknowledge, though, in the 1980s, as I heard Edmund Oliver acknowledge in his 3 years away, that she had changed, that he had changed. She said, "I hope that I have become more aware and more acknowledging of others and differences." So many, many years later, here we are with this another new beginning, where the legacy of family carries on, whether we're blood relatives, all my relations, or collateral relatives. This is a real honor to be with you. Thank you.
Thanks, Shelley, for the investigative work that's enriched our appreciation of the tradition within which we stand. The Reverend Carolyn Woodall is the United Church minister to Vermilion, Kitscoty, and Manville in sunny Alberta, the wild rose country. Carolyn is also a member of the Board of Regents, who's put in considerable effort in cultivating supports for the Lydia E. Gruchy Chair in Pastoral Theology. She joins us today to speak on this and related matters. Carolyn?
Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity, Vernon. I'm honored to be here with everyone today. We're doing some reminiscing today, all of us, and that's a good thing. At Mutual Street Arena on June the 10th, 1925, my great-grandfather was present, the Reverend Dr. A.E.M. Thompson. He was the last superintendent of the London Conference of the Methodist Church in Canada, and he was there. And he served in the United Church, and as a little child growing up in southwestern Ontario, and then in Mississauga, from Windsor to Mississauga. I had great honor for our church, born into the United Church of Canada, and seeing my great-grandfather's picture on the wall at the churches where we visited my grandparents in Windsor gave me sort of great inspiration. But not a picture of myself in the role. That did not enter into it at all. And so I want to talk today a little bit about representation. And I just want to acknowledge, as we've acknowledged the land here today, I also want to acknowledge that this is Juneteenth. And on June 19th, 1865, federal troops arrived in Galveston, Texas, following the end of the Civil War, and were able to enforce the emancipation that had happened 2.5 years previously, and the enslaved people of Galveston were able to actually be free. And we are not free until we all are free. And there's a freedom about Lydia and Edmund and what happened that I think is important in where we're going with what we're doing today. So, as you've heard, Lydia was a minister, ordained or not. She was. That was real. Her work was recognized, valued, sought after, even before her ordination. I'm grateful that she looked for more, and now as I hear about Edmund, that he did too. That she fought for legitimacy of her work on a formal, official level. And it's hard to imagine what she went through, having to be re-interviewed every year for more than 10 years to try to share what it was that she was able to offer. But she led the way for others like myself to be recognized. My own first awareness of women in ordered ministry was when Halton Presbytery assigned the Reverend Lynn Curtin as an interim, and I wonder if there's something in that for me too, after a crisis in our congregation at Arundel United. While she was there, Lynn led me through the Girl Guide's Religion in Life emblem, the 4th level. The project for that level was planning and delivering a complete service of worship, including the sermon. I was 12. That was only 40 years after Lydia's ordination. A dozen years after that leadership moment, I was in theological college at Queen's, following my mother, who had moved into theology from her active work as a layperson at Emmanuel. And 40 years after, here I am with you celebrating today. We cannot know the ripples that span out from our individual actions. Yet they open up possibilities that can create positive pastoral patterns far into the future. For Lydia represents not only her gender in ministry, she represents a spirit of innovation, of meeting the moment, of seeing the possibilities that are to hand. In the effort to have Lydia's ministry acknowledged on par with her male counterparts, her supporters were opening up to what was available rather than being shut down by adherence to staid tradition. There was a freeing, a possibility that happened. And they recognized that there's more than one way to pursue a desired end. It was a new expression of the same spirit that carried the Union churches of the West, which reinvigorated the discussion of national church union after the exhaustion of the Great War and the flu epidemic. It's that same spirit spurred on and sustained those who supported Lydia's appeal for over a decade. I think it's the same spirit that was expressed in the development of the Whole People of God curriculum in Saskatchewan Conference, which has opened up all kinds of understandings of the way that we can learn to be disciples and walk together in faith as a whole people of God. And it is that same spirit of innovative response to the needs of particular contexts, which we might argue after this past weekend's events here, is at the heart of pastoral theology and ministry. It is that spirit which inspires this new endeavor that we celebrate today. Thanks be to God.
Thanks very much, Carolyn. We come now to something of a climax in the penultimate speech in our series of speeches today. Dr. Becca Whitler is the occupant of the Lydia Gruchy Chair in Pastoral Theology. Becca's area of expertise is pastoral studies and liturgical studies. I've enjoyed many moments of joy. I've had many moments of joy in co-teaching courses with Becca. Appropriate to the chair, Becca and the team are the backbone of this college's life in worship. Becca, come and share with us on the legacy of Lydia Gruchy.
Might be more anticlimactic. Friends, this is an exciting day as we launch the Oliver and Gruchy Center, and what an auspicious time as well in the history of the United Church as we celebrate the 100th anniversary of our church. I'm so delighted to be here to speak a little about the legacy of Lydia Emily Gruchy and what it means to me as the Lydia E. Gruchy Chair in Pastoral Studies. This is going to repeat a little bit of what you've heard, but it's worth repeating. She was the first woman to pursue theological studies and then to graduate from what was a Presbyterian theological college in 1923, the college that was to become our beloved St. Andrews. And it was at the urging and with the support of Edmund Oliver. Her subsequent call to ordination, supported by her presbytery in Saskatchewan, was denied repeatedly by the General Council of the United Church of Canada every 2 years for 13 years. She was persistent. And it also speaks to a cloud of witnesses in Saskatchewan who persistently stood with her, including Edmund Oliver, and spoke up on her behalf. Finally, in 1936, she was the first woman to be ordained to the UCC in the middle of the very challenging reality of the 1930s, and I'm going to come back to that. She persevered in her call to minister to those on the margins by offering pastoral care, by teaching, through an incredible witness that eventually garnered her an honorary doctorate from St. Andrews in 1953. Again, a first for a woman in Canada. I'm humbled and inspired to occupy the chair position at St. Andrews College, named in her honor. Since we're all connecting our very selves through our ancestors, I'm going to just take a moment to do that as well. In 1936, the year that Lydia Gruchy was ordained, my great-grandfather was finishing his 2 years as the 6th moderator of the United Church of Canada, Richard Roberts. So he must have known Edmund Oliver. So right now I'm thinking that Edmund Oliver and Richard Roberts are having a cup of tea in heaven, chatting about what we're all doing down here. So 1936 was also the year of my mother's birth. She was born in Osaka, in Japan. Her parents were missionaries to Japan, and my grandfather, my mother's father, was also born in Japan. So there's a kind of United Church history there in Japan as well. And I speak standing on the legacy of those relatives and of my mother who died earlier this year. So I do this in her name as well as the name of groundbreakers like Lydia Gruchy. As a relative newcomer to Saskatoon and the prairies, I'm inspired by how Lydia Gruchy, found her pathway here. The prairies are also, as you all know, the birthplace of the Canadian Commonwealth Federation, and they are part of the seedbed for the Canadian social gospel movement. As a descendant of United Church founders and social gospel movers myself, I was very excited to move here in the fall of 2019. One thing led to another, and I'm still here, completing my 6th year in sunny, friendly, and often quite chilly, the Paris of the Prairies, following in Gruchy's footsteps. Here at the college on the banks of the beautiful South Saskatchewan River, people have been discerning how to bear witness to the liberationist, justice-centered vision of Jesus of Nazareth for more than 100 years. Here on Treaty 6 territory and the homeland of the Métis, we at St. Andrews are building robust and vibrant pathways for the future of the college, along with our colleagues of the Saskatoon Theological Union. We do this work mindful of the brokenness of our world due to the issues we know so well. I'm going to name some of them: colonialism, the aftermath of the pandemic, poverty, war, the climate crisis, racism, sexism, homophobia, transphobia, etc. These are our contexts, and they are also the realities of our students and their communities. So with a commitment to praxis, reflection on our lived realities, with a view towards transformation, so praxis always needs to have transformation. Like Gruchy, we are forging a program to equip students for meeting the needs of the church and our communities into the future. As I reflect on our present day realities, I can't help thinking about the time when Lydia Gruchy was active in the 1930s, especially as we also remember the UCC's origins just a few years prior in 1925. I invite you to imagine with me for a moment how people in the United Church would have responded or did respond to the realities of the 1930s. As you know, in 1929, there was a stock market crash. Imperialism and fascism were on the rise around the world. Italy invaded Ethiopia, Japan invaded China, the Spanish Civil War was raging, and Hitler was on the rise. The rise of fascism. It sounds eerily familiar, doesn't it? And in Canada, it was the dirty 30s. Unemployment, poverty, and hunger were on the rise. In this part of the world, it was the time of the Dust Bowl. Drought on the prairies, along with grasshoppers and hail, meant that the income of the province of Saskatchewan dropped by 90% in 2 years. 66% of the rural population was forced onto relief, and Western provinces were technically bankrupt from 1932 onwards. There were many folks at the margins. Those in power blamed the lost, the last, and the least. Many people, especially the poor or anyone who was a foreigner, were despised, vilified, and persecuted. This also sounds way too familiar right now. So how did the United Church respond? Well, church members responded to those at the margins by feeding them, clothing them, and by working to improve social support for the lost, the last, and the least. Of course, some church members were themselves those who were on the margins. The UCC voiced its concerns at home and abroad about the rise of anti-Semitism, fascism, imperialism, discrimination, and poverty. In 1932 in Calgary, UCC members were involved with the founding of the Canadian Commonwealth Federation, a social and political response to the difficult context in which people found themselves. Caring for the lost, the last, and the least began to be built into the fabric of Canadian society, in large part due to the social gospel movement, of which the UCC was an integral part. The movement wasn't perfect, and neither were the people. We heard last week from Elder Maria Campbell that Tommy Douglas was not so great when it came to Indigenous peoples. So I just put that out there to say, it wasn't a perfect story. But it was the beginning of things like universal health care, universal welfare, and pension plans, advocating for good working conditions, and so on. They were looking for and caring for people at the margins. As I reflect on the deep challenges of the 1930s, so eerily echoed today in the rise of fascism and the hatred towards those on the margins, along with the newer challenge of the vulnerability of life on the planet, I ask you, as I ask myself, what can I do? Or maybe to put it another way, what would Lydia Gruchy do? After all, the United Church from its beginning has sought to advocate for those at the margins, even if not always perfectly. Today, women, the LGBTQ+ community, refugees, those who are racialized, those who are disabled, all those who are despised by the powerful, can not only count on the UCC for advocacy, but are the very leaders of the church themselves. These are the kinds of questions we wrestle with here at St. Andrews, as you all know. They are the kind of questions that will be at the heart of the new Oliver and Gruchy Center. As some of you know, St. Andrews, along with St. Thomas More and our partners at the STU, recently hosted the International Academy of Practical Theology. 125 people from around the world, from South America, Africa, Asia, all over Europe and North America, gathered here, and we were dancing here a week ago today. We learned the Red River Jig from Métis fiddler Scott Duffy, and really, like 50 people danced. It was amazing. We gathered for 4 days to wrestle with the theme, becoming home and rebuilding community in the face of displacement, a theme that was poignantly tangible in the fires raging around us and in the visa denial for several members from the organization. Our keynotes were Elder Maria Campbell and Joseph Netauhau, as well as global and national keynote panels. We visited Batoche, Wanuskewin, and Muskeg Lake Cree Nation, even in the midst of tornado warnings. I was really happy about that because our Europeans were all freaking out, and we were like, this is an authentic Saskatchewan experience. So fork lightning, it was great. There was hail on the road. I said, look, snow. It was really fun. It was thrilling. But more importantly, a conversation was birthed at the conference and is ongoing and was unsettling. And I'm really proud and happy to say that the conversation the Indigenous elders and knowledge keepers who were invited to share at the conference also felt the conversation happening and are interested in keeping the conversation going. Something moved, something shifted. And that's the kind of thing, Vernon, take note, that I hope the center will be able to foster. At St. Andrews, we're so lucky to have the chance to work with students from around the world as we discern together how to offer prophetic ministry in our hurting world. Again, as you all know, we have students who take classes online from Zimbabwe, or from the Philippines. We have students in person or online from across the country. And our students represent an incredible diversity of cultural, denominational, and contextual experiences and traditions. We all learn from each other all the time, and that learning will be supported by the new center. We do have a choice to make about our future and how we can respond to the call to respond to the brokenness of our world due to the issues we know so well. I have them listed here again, but I won't repeat them because you know them. These are our contexts and the context of our students, just as they were in the 1930s. So with a commitment to praxis, by reflecting on our lived realities with a view to transforming them, like Lydia Gruchy, like Edmund Oliver, we forge ahead. We stand on their shoulders, whether by teaching, by feeding the hungry, by housing the homeless, by accompanying those with addictions, by protesting on the street, by welcoming refugees, by celebrating diversity and interculturality, by advocating for those who are discriminated against, the marginalized, the downtrodden. We too can be persistent, like Lydia Gruchy, like Edmund Oliver, in our struggles for justice, like the shepherd who does not give up on finding the one lost sheep, or like the persistent widow who searches for her coin, and the other one who speaks to the unjust judge. Let us be bold disciples who are not afraid of daring acts for justice, enlivened and inspired by our forebears and their commitments, their witness, and their deep spirituality. Amen.
Becca, thanks for that stellar social historical exposition that serves only to buttress our understanding of the gravity of our undertaking. Today, I'm grateful for your words of encouragement. I'm inspired by your narratives that inform the spirit and the rich heritage that inspire the genesis of this Oliver and Gruchy Learning Center. It's my fervent desire that the development and operation of the center accords with the traditions and the practices of the historical personages from whom the center draws its name and inspiration. What is the Oliver and Gruchy Learning Center? The unfolding of the center's design, as some of you are aware, is in 4 parts. The center is the new home of the lifelong learning pathway, a collection of certificate programs affording students the opportunity for designing their own program of learning to suit their self-articulated goals. This program is the fruit of the labors of the academic redesign team, a program in its 2nd year of operation with more than 20 students admitted thus far. The center boasts its own growing media hub, which houses the broadcasts of the center's collaborative partners for enriching learning with the provision of audio and video resources for stimulating learning, both for the lifelong learning pathway and for any who would tarry on the pages of the center's website. Envisioned also as a raft of student support services to facilitate transitions into seminary education, help for those navigating the strange culture of North American academic discourse in all of its idiosyncratic glory. Finally, we envision also the center as a locus for probing prognostications on the evolving terrain of theological education. Fully realized, the center will be a venue for seminars, workshops, and other educational fora where scholars and residents might lead us in plotting a future for the Academy and the Church, in bringing divine sustenance and succor to this aching, wounded world. Perhaps this last aspect of the census life best represents the penchant for a knowledgeable novelty in grappling with the troubled travails of this Canada, of this world, that Edmund Oliver and Lydia Gruchy stand for. A point so amply demonstrated, I think, today in the words of our speakers. In closing, I invite you to find your point of entry in this venture, and I invite you to begin dreaming with us over the gastronomic delights set before us. Lunch will commence at noon or whenever I'm done preparing the coffee. Thank you.